Hey, what's up? It's a Strategic Finance Whale, aka Lord Whalekev again. Thanks for all your feedback from the other videos, and today I'm going to talk to you about creating a rolling forecast in FR Studio. Alright, so let's start by analyzing the issue. Well, first we need to be able to show a rolling 3-month forecast for a report. The issue is that Hyperion Planning Cube that we're using has different dimensions for period and year. It's not just one contiguous time dimension. There's also a requirement for the end users to be able to select a month, and the report will show the 3-month forecast. First, let's start by creating a grid. Let's put the years and periods across the columns. We're going to be using both formula and data columns, and the other dimensions you can arrange as you see necessary. Alright, let's start off with the easy one first. This is going to be for the current year, January through October. What we're going to do is use the range function for the period dimension. So we're going to set the start of the range to be the current POV for periods. This is going to allow that the user can select which period they want to see the next 3 months for. Then the end member is just going to be the current POV for the periods offset by 2, giving you the 3 months. Alright, now let's create a column to handle the suppression. Help, help, I'm being suppressed. That's not the real quote, but let's move on. We're going to create this column to have the period to be the current POV for periods. This is the period that the user is going to select. We are then going to select hide always. Very similar to how I have it in the screenshot, but the opposite. Check it. Then we get to get all fancy. Ooh. When you select the columns, we're going to use the advanced options. When you do the advanced suppression, you're going to suppress the column if member name of periods equals November, or if member name equals December. Now we're going to create a formula column for the 3-month totals. Basically, just sum the first column you created, the one with the range. Then we're going to get to go all fancy again and use the advanced options for conditional suppression. But this time, select data values in column, the one that you just created on the last slide to handle the suppression, and then suppress if that column is suppressed, like kind of an inception for suppression. Do this on the range column as well, the first one that you created. Alright, now things are getting a little bit more complex. We're going to be moving into the areas where we start rolling over between the years. So, we're going to start a range from November to December and then next year, January. So, how do we do that? We're just going to do similar to the January through October column that we created before with the range. We're going to set the start of the range to be current POV for periods. Again, so that when the user selects the period, this is when it starts. And then we're going to have it only offset by 1 this time. Then we're going to set that year, that column, to be the current year substitution variable. Now we create a second column. It's going to be January, and then the next year's substitution variable. So now the suppression on this is going to be suppress if periods not equals November. So really, the only time we're going to see these columns is if it equals November. So it's going to be November, December, then January of next year. Like we did before, we're going to want to create a total column for the 3 months that we were just creating. This time, we're going to add the range from November to December and current year to the other column with January and the next year. Again, if you want to play with the fancy stuff, you can have a custom heading. You can use the member name function to display the months and years associated with the totals. Again, we're going to use the conditional suppressing, and we're going to suppress if the prior column, the one that has suppressed if not November, is suppressed. So again, suppress if the other column is suppressed. Finally, we're on to December. This is going to follow very similar steps to what we did with November. We're going to start by creating a data column with the current POV for periods, and the current year is going to be the substitution variable for the current year. Then we're going to create a data column for January and February with next year's substitution variable for the year. Then we're going to set suppression on that first column to be periods not equals December. So this is going to basically say if it's not December, it's going to hide everything. Then we're going to create a total column, adding the 2 columns above together, similar to what we did before. And then we're going to suppress that and the January-February columns if the December one is suppressed. Now, let's add some idiot proofing. Enhanced user friendliness. So what we're going to want to do is set up the user POV to restrict the choices to the 12 months. Because if we try to do a roll-up parent, Q1, year total, that kind of stuff, it's not going to work because it can't go pick the next month. So by going into the setup user POV, you can define the choices list to just be Jan, Feb, March, basically the level zeros of the period dimension. All right, now it's time to bring it all together. What I've done here is laid out all of the columns and broken it into 3 sections based on what period the user selects. So if you look, user selects any time between January and October, Column A, that's hidden, and it's a test for November or December for suppression. Column B is the range, the current point of view to the current point of view plus 2. Now we couldn't do the suppression here because if the user had selected October, November and December would be suppressed. And column C is just the total of those two. The next section is if the user selects November. Notice the first section has 3 columns. It needed for the current POV for suppression, but only 1 column for the range. The second section has 4 because we need the suppression test column and then 2 columns, 1 for the current year and 1 for the next year. The third section has 3 again because the suppression can be done for December. You see column H is just period equals current point of view. So if the user selects December, and if it is not December, everything else is suppressed. So we also needed a second column for the next year. The final columns are there just to be fancy. I added a text for spacing, year totals for the current and next year, and then hidden column to rank it to apply a sort. All right, now's the time to look at the results. Let's take a look right now. Select July. Notice from the preview user point of view, only the periods, the level 0 members are available. That way we don't accidentally select any Q1, Q2s, etc. of the summary parents. And you can see from selecting July, we've got July, August, and September, a 3-month total, and then the year totals. Okay, now let's see what happens if we select November. As you can see, November and December show up, as does January of the next year. You can also see the fancy columns with the member names that show the sum of November 17 plus December 17 plus January 18. And finally, let's see what happens if we select December. Note, we pick December from the user point of view, and we see December and January, February of next year. Yay! All right, so let's start by analyzing the issue. Well, first we need to be able to show a rolling 3-month forecast for a report. The issue is that Hyperion Planning Cube that we're using has different dimensions for period and year. It's not just one contiguous time dimension. There's also a requirement for the end users to be able to select a month, and the report will show the 3-month forecast. So, in conclusion, you can see we were able to show a rolling 3-month forecast for a report. We were able to overcome the issue of having period and year as 2 different dimensions. And the user is able to select the month and have the report show that month and the next 2 rolling over years.